My name is Mike McNamara. I'm the Mutual of Enumclaw Field Professor here at Washington State University. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 33rd Annual Walton Lecture. This lecture series has brought to our campus prominent leaders in the field of risk management and insurance. And with today's lecture, we're continuing with that fine tradition. The lecture is made possible through the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of Washington. The lecture honors their past president, Mr. Max Walton, who was an independent insurance agent in Richland, Washington, many, many years ago. This is actually the first of two events that we have for our students this week. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock in room 125, we're hosting an event that we call Insurance Industry Night. And we're going to have 5 speakers representing different disciplines in risk management and insurance who will be making presentations. Then after the presentation, we'll have a networking event at the Carson Center. As with tonight's event, amplifier credits are available for tomorrow's events as well. And now to today's lecture. The leadership of my Risk Management and Insurance Advisory Board last spring encouraged me to have a technology risk manager present the lecture this fall. And from Central Casting, we're very pleased to have with us this evening Collin Sower. Collin is the risk manager with Micron. Micron, of course, is a global leader in computer memory. They have manufacturing operations in Virginia and Idaho and throughout the Pacific Rim. And those countries are listed in your program for this evening. The latest ranking from Fortune 500, they have Micron at number 170. The field of risk management has evolved. Traditionally, risk management was property liability and personnel-related loss exposures. In the 1990s, some businesses began considering speculative financial risks as well. The next step in the evolution was something called enterprise risk management, where all of the risks that an organization faces are considered by the risk manager. Of course, one of those important risks is production risk, which has probably received short shrift as far as risk analysis goes. It's an important risk for Micron, given the cost of business interruption if one of their manufacturing facilities were to go down. If there was a fire or an explosion, for example, there'd be a large business income loss. So Collin brought an engineering background to the practice of risk management at Micron, and he's developed an innovative approach to quantifying this loss exposure. It allows Micron to prioritize the risks that they face and to make risk control investments where they will have the greatest impact. Collin earned a degree in mechanical engineering from Boise State University and a minor in applied mathematics. He's a proud veteran of the U.S. Navy, having served on the USS Kitty Hawk during Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield. His lecture is titled Quantifying Global Operational Risks at Micron. After his remarks this evening, we should have time for some questions and answers. So please be thinking of something that you'd like to ask a practicing risk manager while he's making his presentation. At the conclusion of the event, we'll have a special presentation for our speaker. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in providing a warm Washington State welcome to Collin Sower. I always say Sower.
Thank you.
Who is our 2025 Walton Lecture speaker. Collin, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Professor McNamara. I'm sure everybody can hear me okay? Okay. Excellent. I like the thumbs up in the back. That helps out tremendously. I'm going to try to maneuver. I tend to walk as I talk. I like to move around a little bit, but I'm kind of confined with the lights and the screen, so bear with me. So yeah, my name is Collin Sower, and thanks first of all. It's a very prestigious event. I'm very happy to have been asked to present today. And so we're going to jump right into it. By the way, I enjoy a little bit more conversational, some dialogue. So, whether the questions and answers happen during the presentation or at the end, that's fine with me. So don't be afraid to just kind of, raise your hand at certain points, or, if it's something I'm going to cover a little bit later on, I'll let you know. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. And so let's start off with, we got to define terms. What is risk? Well, it really does depend on who you're talking to. I mean, I've got a couple of examples here. I don't know if anybody's a blackjack player. What do you do here? Do you split it? Do you hit it? Which one do you do? So I can see there's some blackjack players. So that's one way of looking at risk. Another one is life choices. So this may or may not be a good decision. It's definitely going to involve some form of risk. And then for those of us that are old enough, there's actually a game that's titled Risk. But in all of these cases, they all involve some degree of uncertainty or volatility. And it usually has a negative connotation that goes with it. There are some positive risks that are out there, but for the most part, in our industry especially, we're looking at the negative side of things. So let's start off with most people, well, it's been around for decades now. How do you quantify risk? In other words, how do we know which risk is more than another one? And, I think a lot of you are very familiar with something like this, a 5x5 heat map. It's called a heat map. And so you kind of look at things, and you got likelihood along the top, severity along the side. And you say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, with a higher number being, not so desirable, how do we quantify risk? And it's like, okay, this is a pretty good process here. That's not bad. It's a good start. But as each of these risks have multiplied, especially if you move into like a global enterprise or you've got a very large business, this doesn't provide the right level of granularity. Well, industry recognizes this, and so there's an outfit called the AIAG and VDA. We're going to see those here in a moment. And they came up with a process that's called risk priority number. They actually wrote a book in 2008, this handbook, that addresses FMEA, failure modes and effects analysis. And this is a lot of terminology. We're going to get into the fun stuff here in just a moment. But really what it does, it says, okay, how can we establish a process by which we can quantify risks that are across our business? And they broke it down into 3 different criteria. Instead of likelihood and severity, they said, okay, we like those 2, but there's something else that's missing. It's detection. How'd you find out about it? So we intuitively understand severity. We understand likelihood. This detection was an important adder to this. Now it's a 10 by 10 by 10 matrix. And what they said is, okay, we're going to start off with a scenario. And actually, they're doing design. They're looking at like automotive designs. That's what the VDA and the AIAG is. They're automotive industry organizations. But this has been going back to like NASA and the military, the same kind of thing, but it just kind of really took root and got some real momentum in the automotive industry. So you begin with a design or a scenario that will affect a location, and then you look at each one of these criteria, and you say, okay, it's this or that, and then you multiply the 3 together, and again, the higher the number, the less desirable it is. And now what you end up with is this 10 by 10 by 10 matrix, do a little bit of math, multiply them together, you get a number between 1 and 1,000. And obviously the higher the number, the higher the risk. And just from experience, we've learned that anything over 400 is pretty much considered a high risk. I mean, you're going to have to, 7 times 7 times 7 is only 343. So anything over 400 really is a higher risk. But the important thing to recognize is that no matter what you do, there's some degree of risk. There's always going to be some risk. You can never eliminate it, you can only reduce it. So this is the 2008 version, and let's take a look a little bit more at the differences between what was in that 5 by 5 matrix, and let's dig a little bit deeper into the severity, occurrence, and detection that they came up with in 2008. So severity, how bad can it be? And we kind of, you can kind of see some of the definitions here on the screen. You can see the effect. It's like, okay, we can see, well, fatality, loss of utility to an entire production, utility with baseline charge, and there's kind of a description there, a qualitative description. But there's a couple of things that jump out to most people. And this is where we'll see maybe if there's a little bit of audience participation here. There's some things that we're missing here that are pretty critical in establishing, especially if we've got multiple sites or we've got a global business. Can anybody think of one of the things that might jump out at you? It's okay if you don't, that's okay. I've got the material, I know what it says. Okay, so a couple things that this doesn't do. First thing is that we've got different risk owner groups. That's my term for it, is risk owner groups. And what I mean by that is those first two, those are more personnel safety. Then we start to get into production impacts. Well, those two things are not the same. So we're kind of conflating these two different risk perspectives. We got somebody who's playing blackjack and somebody who's buying gas station sushi, and they're not the same. Another thing that there's a little bit of a gap here is that it treats all the sites equally the same. So in a company where you've got like multiple factories, they're not all going to be the same size. So this would say, okay, my largest, if I have a disruption of my largest facility, that's going to be the same as a disruption at my smallest facility. And we know that that's not the case either. Then finally, there's not a time component. If I take a 1 second power bump at my most important factory, that's not the same as a week's worth of an outage at a warehouse. So how do we're missing relevance on two scales. One is the size of the facility, and the other is how long, what's the duration. Well, let's move on to the next one. Occurrence. Okay, how often do we think it's going to happen? Now notice, if we look under likelihood, it's got the same descriptors under likelihood as we had in our 5x5 matrix. Very high or very high probability, very low probability. But now we've added in some time. And by the way, all of this stuff is public. It's publicly available. You can go online and pull up all of this material. So feel free to go out and do that. I encourage that. But now they said, okay, well, we're going to start off with 10 being more than monthly, and 3 is once in every 10 years. So what do we see as a gap here? Yes?
Variance and seasonality.
Variances in seasonality, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. If you got a seasonal business, that can make a big difference. What it really says is that frequency can be very subjective. It's another way of saying it. And really, what it doesn't account for, what it relies on is you having a very deep knowledge and some kind of history behind these events. But what if you're dealing with a first-of-a-kind scenario? Now this just feeds into that subjectivity. Now, if we're doing this for the first time ever, I might think it's going to happen once a month, so I'm going to give it a 9. Somebody else says, oh, no, we've got much better protocols behind that. That's not going to happen but once every 5 years. So we've got a 9 versus a 4. We're way apart. And we're just going to be, throw us in a room with some boxing gloves and see who wins. It's very subjective. Then we have detection. How do we find out about it? It seems silly, but a lot of times how do you find out about something? It seems intuitive. It's like, well, we're just going to know. Not always the case. And by the way, SCADA, I've got the Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. It's basically a monitoring network that's kind of within the industry, quite common. But some of the gaps here, again, we're talking about after the event has happened, okay? How do we find out about it after it happened? And historically, there wasn't a whole lot of attention paid to this one. I think part of it is because the definitions weren't very good. And we were in a different risk world in 2008 than when the next edition of the handbook came out. So here we go, 2019. Risk priority number in 2019, and this is a common theme. Better definitions make for a better process. Strong language makes for a strong process. So now in severity, what they said was, and this is kind of scary, but it's very liberating. They said, you know your business better than anybody else. So you figure out what is severe for you. Okay, so it's now bespoke or customized for each company. We're going to get into that. That's kind of one of the focus points of this entire lecture. I think one of the other huge shift in the environment was on the occurrence side, because no longer are we looking at likelihood. We're now going to focus on the controls that we have in place that prevent that occurrence from even happening. So how do we keep it from happening? And it's going to focus on, it's going to draw two distinctions. Are your controls based on people, like behavior, or are they based on devices, technical controls? And then we get into detection. Again, there's a split here. Our first criteria is our detection human-based, or is it machine-based? And then how effective is it? So, then the other thing is it kind of extends a little bit further into preventing future damage. And detection starts to become a lot more important in the world we live in. And we're going to get into some examples on that in just a couple of minutes. So 2019 was when the new version came out. And in 2020, of course, this was COVID year. So this, I got to reading this in like late 2019 and through the spring of 2020 because I had a lot of time on my hands and working from home. I read through the whole process and I said, I think this can be manipulated, not just for this design FMEA, but let's use this to prioritize risks, operational risks, across all of Micron. But in order to do that, you've got to have, remember I said this bespoke or the freedom to customize. Okay, well, that means that I had to find alignment. We're talking about these different risk perspectives. You got to come up with some way of getting alignment across these different groups. You got to get them all into the same room. Somebody in quality is going to have a very different perspective than somebody in logistics and somebody in public relations or somebody in facilities. So how do we get that alignment? Well, the nice thing is we're not really trying to say that one thing is equal to another. We're just trying to get people to somewhat align so they can have a conversation kind of as peers, or at what level do they become peers. So for today's focus, we're just going to look at two specific risk owner groups, the ones that most people would normally associate with operational risk, especially at a manufacturing facility. Health and safety, environmental health and safety impacts. So what I did was I said, okay, I went to our global facilities team. I said, all right, guys, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being your worst day possible, what does that look like? And then give me breakdown. Give me different levels and different granularities down to a 1, which is basically, here's a Band-Aid. And they did. And while they came back with some very strong definitions, the idea behind all of this is that we have experts, or at least people who are experienced, that are performing these evaluations. And while they can give really good examples of what is a 9 versus a 6 versus a 3, it can't capture everything. There has to be some discernment from the industry professionals of that particular risk group. And then the other one that I, because I do Micron's insurance, we had to look at our financial impact. I'm actually in the Treasury and Finance department. And so, okay, what is financial impact? So like many major companies or even, small businesses, they purchase property damage and business interruption insurance. The property damage makes sense. We all get that. But the business interruption, that says, okay, if I own a Krispy Kreme shop and I've got 3 donut fryers and I make $3,000 a day and one of my fryers gets burned up and it takes like a week for that new fryer to get put in, they're going to reimburse me for that week's loss of income while that fryer's down. That's the business interruption part. Like I said, it's going to vary from company to company. I just use Krispy Kreme. I've got a fictional business that we'll be putting up on the screen here to help flesh out this concept. But it's usually the first place that people look. Any questions so far? Okay, got to make sure. So the business interruption. This is a tough one because if Micron's a huge company. I mean, Professor McNamara said, we've got facilities all over the globe. How do you quantify business interruption? Well, this is where the new approach comes into play. Every year, we have to declare our values per site. So me and my team, we go through our internal accounting, different data streams, and we say all of the property that we have in Taiwan is worth this much, and all of our tools and the buildings, and so we quantify the property side. But then we also go through and we identify how much that particular site contributes to the income of the enterprise as a whole. We do it on a site-by-site basis. When I looked at this process, I said, well, okay, an insurance policy is 365 days, and we declare it for each site. Well, now, it seemed obvious to me at the time, let's just make this a time-based value. So we take that per site annual value, we divide it by 365, we now have a daily business interruption value. Divided by 24, you now have an hourly business interruption value. Like, okay, that's great, cool, I guess. Where does that lead us to? Well, now when we go to each one of these scenarios, we're gonna work with the site and engineering or facilities team, and we're gonna look at that. We're gonna look at that scenario, and we're gonna say, okay, how much of this site is gonna be impacted by a power disruption? And how long is it gonna be until we get back to normal operations? And we kind of guess, and we kind of do some tabletop exercises, but we collaborate and we say, okay, it's going to be this much of the site for this long, and now it's just straight math. Now it's just straight math. It's a formula that will quantify the financial impact from a business interruption. And this is exactly what we're doing. So we say percent impacted times the duration times the hourly BI. Now this does assume 24-hour operations, but it can be, again, it's bespoke. It's tailored to each company. So if you only operate for 8 hours a day, obviously you'd make that adjustment. But it's still just math. But in incorporating a time-based and allocated process, we have now normalized. So now it's no longer a guessing game. And if we're wrong by the same amount for everybody. It normalizes that business interruption across the entire enterprise. And this is one of the things that is setting this process apart from all of the other risk prioritization processes that are being used around the globe today. So let's look a little bit. The numbers here for the financial impact are made up, okay? They're just for illustration. But this is what we did. We said, okay, EHS, what is your worst day? And then we went back and looked at our financials and we said, okay, what is a 10 in terms of impact to the business? And I think we can all agree that multiple fatalities or mass casualties, that's a 10. I don't know how you get much worse than that from a personnel safety perspective. That's a 10 for anybody. And then a number, 1, no injury or no treatment. And you can see that they've did a really good job of breaking down those definitions along those different levels. It's important to recognize here that what we are not doing, we're not establishing a value for human life, okay? We're just trying to get two very different perspectives of risk to have some kind of correlation, some kind of alignment between them so they can at least get these things prioritized properly. And the other thing is that when we're doing these evaluations, whatever is the highest score, if it's health, if we say that there's a scenario that could actually like maim a person and that would be like an 8, but the financial impact is somewhere down at a 4, we're taking the highest of the two numbers. And then finally, the nice thing about this is that it can be expanded to other risk owner groups. And this is where the magic really kind of comes in. This allows you to export this across the entire enterprise. You can go to legal, you can go to cyber, you can go to public relations. Now, a 10, reputation, public relations, I'm not besmirching them, but their most important risk might be, we get some bad press for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks. So is that anywhere near multiple fatalities or mass casualties? Probably not. Maybe their highest is maybe a 6 compared to everybody else. That's okay. We're still trying to get some directional alignment across these very different perspectives of risk. So now here we go with occurrence or controls. I think this is going to be renamed as controls in the next version. And the thing to point out here again, we mentioned it earlier, there's no time associated with any of these criteria. You're not going to see monthly, you're not going to see annually. It is purely based on the controls that you have in place. And the first thing you do is you say, okay, are my controls behavioral? Are they based on a person doing something, or are they technical? And once you do that, now it guides you. That's the other thing I like about this process is it really does guide you it guides everybody who's doing an evaluation to say, is it behavioral or technical? It's kind of a digital choice here. And now we're just going to be talking about how effective that control is in preventing your failure. Sure, there's going to be a little bit of subjectivity, but we can probably resolve that. If you say that it's a technical control, that it's somewhat effective versus are effective, we got a 6 versus a 4 there. We're a long ways away from having a 9 versus a 3. We want to be directionally accurate and try to drive some consensus across whoever the evaluator is. And then detection, again, it kind of focuses more on people versus equipment as your first defining criteria. Is it a person who saw it, or is it a device that saw it? And then, after that, what happens after we detect it? Is there any kind of a response that comes about because of it? And this becomes really important when we're talking about things like cyber attacks, where you may not know about it until you have some kind of, your cybersecurity team, or there's an automated program that says, oh, we've got a bad actor in our network, and then it can respond by creating firewalls or segmenting off that part of the network. So detection becomes a lot more important in the current risk environment. In fact, where this didn't get a whole lot of attention, as we're going to see in our example here in a couple minutes, it can be the first place that you start because you have to know about it first in a lot of these cases in order to determine what the response will be. So, how do we implement this? Clearly define, again, good language makes for a good process. Clearly define your situation. Run the RPN 20 on your initial risk. Then find a solution. This is where you're going to be engaging with maybe an engineering consultant, or maybe you've got your local engineering team or global facilities team will come in and they'll say, okay, what is our solution to that problem? And once you get that solution, you're going to reassess the situation as if that solution were there, and now you're going to have your residual risk. We're going to go through an example of this and demonstrate how it becomes so powerful for executives and senior management, why they've really embraced this process. So here we've got our fictional company. It's got a couple of different sites around, maybe around the Northwest. Not sure what they're manufacturing, but that's okay. We've got these different sites there, and we've got their annual income, and we've figured out on a percentage basis what their contribution is. So that's the site annual revenue. Like I said before, I've already done the math. We divide by 365 to get a site daily business interruption value and a site hourly business interruption value. So now we know when we go in to do an assessment, and by the way, insurance companies, well, it's not uncommon for them to visit high value sites every year and do an analysis. And they'll give you opportunities for improvement, things that they see that they want you to do better. And so having this kind of a process really helps out a lot. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But here's our scenario. A little bit of technical language here. 6,000 volt transformer at this site does not have an auto transfer switch. We have redundant, so we've got two transformers, A and B, and an auto transfer switch is exactly what it says. If something goes wrong here, it'll swap the load over to the other one. In this scenario, we don't have auto transfer switches, and if there's a ground fault current on one side of the grid, it could cause one of the transformers to trip offline. So we walk through this and we say, okay, site team, help us out here. And this is one of those situations in which we have to find out, how did we find out? And because we don't have any kind of automation on there, our first indication is when the lights go out on half of the plant, which means that a human will detect that. There was no device that said, look out, here it comes. It's a person saying, lights are out on half the site. So we look at our matrix and then we say that's a 6. Occurrence. The maintenance guys, they're out there. They check this stuff once a quarter. Okay, they're pretty good at it. But it's a behavioral control, and it's only somewhat effective, so that becomes a 7. And then the severity, oh, here's the big one. Because it takes a full week to repair that other transformer, get the load switched, get everything back online, replace the burned out conductors. That's a huge hit. $1.4 million. Again, this right here, we're doing exactly what we said. We're taking the hourly business interruption value times the time times half the site. And that's how we're quantifying the business interruption for this event. And it turns out that's an 8. So now if we do the math here, 336. That is our initial risk assessment score. So let's come up with a scenario for a solution. You say, okay, we got with our electrical engineers, we got with the site maintenance folks, we said, how do we do this? Let's install an auto transfer switch, some ground fault relays. It's going to cost us $260,000, 3 months, give or take. And if we do that, what does this same scenario look like? We're going to go through the same process. This ground fault relay catches it, sends an alarm, initiates a transfer from this one that got impacted to this one over here. It's instantaneous. Machine detected, take action to prevent further damage. We're now down to a 3. Remember, the lower the number here, the better. So 3 on the detection side. And because it took action, we have a technical prevention or a technical control in place. That's our first criteria. Now we're just going to say, and I said, it's going to be effective. You could say it's highly effective, but if we just go with conservative, we say it's effective, that means that it's a 4 on our controls or occurrence side. And then the severity, we didn't lose any production. There was no impact to the site whatsoever. Now, there is about $30,000 worth of labor because the transformer didn't get burned up. There's a little bit of maintenance that has to be done on it to clean it up, but it's a $30,000 one-time cost. That ends up being a 2 on our financial scale that we had up there earlier. So now we're at a 24. This is now quantifiable. This is now real to budget managers, that we have just reduced that risk by 92%. Straight math, 24 divided by 336. That 336 is our initial, the 24 is our residual risk. And this now becomes a very powerful tool across the organization, within our global facilities department for sure. Why? Well, we've enhanced objectivity. We've reduced subjectivity tremendously. Good definitions, good language make for a good process. And instead of it being personality driven, when you get out in the corporate world, it's the same thing even outside the corporate world. Who's got the best PowerPoint? Who knows somebody's cousin? Why is that person always asking for more money? That all goes away. It's no longer about, I like him better. Why can't, it seems like we're always pumping money into this one site. Why can't they get their stuff together and turn this around? Now the process is telling you where the money needs to be spent. And actually, it helps you identify where is the most efficient place to deploy that capital. We've got limited capital. It's not infinite amounts of money or time that's out there. What's the most efficient way? So if we have 2 risks that have the same initial rating, and this one over here, risk A, okay, it's 343, 7 times 7 times 7. I got to spend $1 million, and I'm going to drop it down to 256. That's a data point. Got option B over here, 343. Cost me $100,000, but I reduced the risk now down to 144. I'm going to do this every day, and I'm going to save that $900,000 to take care of other things. And now I can go to my insurance company who visits me every year, and they say, how come you didn't fix that? You can say, doesn't make financial sense. We eliminated 5 things over here. You want us to focus on this one over here. Internally and externally, it's objective, and it justifies itself. So, when we're looking at this entire process, again, the whole idea is that we're trying to reduce or remove as much subjectivity as possible. We want it to be able to be the same result or almost the same result regardless of who the evaluator is. We can spread this across multiple audiences. It can be internal when we're doing budgeting. It can be external to help justify why we didn't do certain things, but why it's actually to the insurer's benefit that we did do these other things. We can expand it across multiple risk owner groups. It's almost infinitely expandable across these different departments or areas within an enterprise. With the removal of subjectivity, you should get the goal here is to be directionally accurate. Okay, we're not going to be super precise about this, but we should get the same or about the same results regardless of who's looking at it, because like I said before, if we looked at controls, it's either people-based or it's machine-based. Okay, now we're just arguing about how effective it is. But again, we're just narrowing or removing that subjectivity. And then, like I said, our executives love it, because if you only have a certain amount of dollars to go after end of life or operational risks. Again, these are all about operational risks. Now they're just looking at how much is it going to cost me and how much risk am I going to reduce. This has been in place at Micron for about, oh, by the way, it's called RPN 20 because I came up with it in the year 2020. That's all. That's the magic behind it. But that tells you how old this is, and we actually got it implemented globally in 2022, and our senior vice president for all front-end operations, he loves this. And all of Global Facilities is using this. We've got our insurers on board. They know what RPN 20 is. And I got to tell you that if our deductible, for example, is like $1 million, just for example, and they come to us and they say, hey, we've got this opportunity for improvement and the business interruption is going to be $500,000. I said, okay, well, take it off. They're like, why? I was like, because if that ever happens, you're never going to know about it. It's less than the deductible. So don't even bother putting it on there. Only put things on there that we can do something about and are meaningful. So this provides clear, quick decision guidance for our executives. It helps us to justify to our insurers and internal and external audiences why we do or don't do certain things. So we're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A, but that's pretty much the end of my remarks. I did want to say thank you to several folks, independent insurance agents, brokers of Washington. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. Professor McNamara, Sue McMurray and Angie Center, Kyle Ricks, the president of the Risk Management and Insurance Advisory Board is here. Lauren Patty, vice president of the advisory board. And then finally, thank you for allowing me to share this process with you, all of the students and faculty at Wazoo. So, we've got questions. This is a question and answer period.
So being an international organization, operationally, can you speak a little bit to the challenges of doing this assessment in the international environment versus just domestically? Because obviously the different geopolitical risks, all those kinds of things, how you guys gather your information and figure that part out.
So the question, let me rephrase it, just make sure I got it. So being an international company, how do the risks in each region or territory alter or shift the way the process is used? If we were to go back to severity under the EHS side, number 10 and number 9 say government compliance with non-compliance or regulatory non-compliance without warning and with warning. That is going to be the biggest differentiator across the international landscape because not all laws are the same in each country. So we trust each one of our evaluators to be aware of building codes, fire codes, the OSHA equivalent in Singapore versus what it is in Taiwan. I think that's probably the biggest differentiator. Micron does all of our accounting in US dollars, so it kind of normalizes that part of it. I think that's probably the largest influence behind international or across different locations. Does that answer the question?
One other quick question. So your ability to retool a different facility, obviously to lessen the impact in a major event. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. How do we, so within the risk management, where I focus specifically is we focus on robustness and resilience. So robustness is, I like to say it's your ability to take a punch. Okay, so whatever kind of an impact it is, whether it be an earthquake, a typhoon, a power outage, it's your ability to take a punch. Resilience is if you get knocked down, how quickly can you get back up? So within Micron and my background in facilities engineering, we're always focused on redundancy. When we say N+1, if you've heard that term before, that's just the beginning for us. We do N+1 plus future. So within our, we can't have like a standby fab sitting somewhere, but we can build in redundancy with respect to like the number of tools to accomplish a specific process. So using the Krispy Kreme example, if I know I need 3 fryers, I'm going to have 4. Well, we're going to have the same thing in, let's say, our diffusion process, where we use a tool called a furnace. we might need 85 furnaces. We're probably going to have like 8 or 9 that are sitting there because we know that there's going to be maintenance, there's going to be breakdowns, there's going to be, we can ride through variations in production cadence because it's not a very static market, it's a very dynamic and volatile market. And so when we build in these redundancies, even within a site, we'll segment things too. So we'll have, maybe 3 different buildings on a site, different power feeders coming into each building. So in that way, we try to make ourselves robust, but then we have resilience in a lot of our ability. We have very strong procedures on recovery from events. How quickly can we get back? It's a great question. Did I answer the question? Okay. About anybody else? Come on. Yes.
With Micron technology, a lot of these deals are fast moving. We've seen stuff with OpenAI, AMD, a lot of things happening quickly this week. So my question for you is how quickly and how often are you having to update your business interruption insurance, maybe as you're adding new deals on a weekly basis or daily basis or things like that?
Good question. So our business interruption values, we update those every year when we do our business renewal. Now, the way we do our calculation for our business interruption is a little bit different in that because we have to declare 1 year's worth of time. So with an industry as volatile as ours is, what we've done is we take 2 quarters of existing or historical results, and we'll take 1 quarter of guidance from the board for the quarter that they're currently in, and then 1 quarter of guidance from the street, say from Bloomberg. And then we use that as the declaration value to the insurers. And then how we allocate it is an ugly process. It takes 4 to 5 weeks to actually aggregate our insurable values and allocate it to each site. But by doing that, looking backward and looking forward, we're trying to remove as much volatility as we can. And there are going to be some insurers that, if we hit a boom cycle like we're in right now, okay, they're not going to charge us as much premium as perhaps they could. But the flip side happens too. Like in 2022, the bottom fell out of the market. So we'd already declared our values, and they get the benefit of the premium that we're never going to meet. We're never going to meet the projections that we had. So the way and it's a partnership. We have a long-term partnership with our insurers, and that's part of it. Is saying, look, if you're going to be with us during good times and bad times, I mean, sometimes it's going to go your way, sometimes it's not. So we try to remove that volatility and uncertainty as much as we can by looking backwards 2 quarters and forwards 2 quarters.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet. Anybody else? We got one right here. Yes, sir.
And I just had a question in regards to fraud, because I know in the insurance industry, fraud can be a very prevalent and big deal. Mm-hmm. And so I guess my question to you is, how often do you see that? What kind of process do you have when you encounter that? And
is there a particular kind of fraud that you had in mind, or?
No, just generally speaking, I guess just to insurance.
Okay. So for us, Micron as a company and my professional engineer's license, there's certain codes of ethics, and we have zero tolerance for non-compliance. So we do not manipulate any kind of data or any kind of figures. We actively engage with, and we actually have our insurers come to the sites a lot of times. There's an annual visit that is performed as what's called a property underwriting report that happens every year. We're very transparent because the reality is any short-term gains they're going to find out about, right? They're going to find it out sooner or later. And so we are completely transparent. We tell our insurers, we walk them through every step of how we calculate our property damage and business interruption values. And that's been the focus here, but we also buy like cyber insurance and we buy transit insurance. And we full disclosure. Honesty is the best policy. I guess that's maybe the best answer, is that, and in that environment, sunlight's the best disinfectant, right?
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Professor McNamara.
So, Collin, I'm wondering if this model is proprietary for Micron, and you said last evening that you belong to an association of technology risk managers.
Yeah.
Do you share the information with them? Are they imitating what you're doing? I'm kind of curious about that. Or could you market this yourself?
It is not proprietary. I could market it myself. I've actually been asked. I made the same presentation a couple of years ago. I have to make trips quite often to go see our sites and our insurers, and happened to catch up with the risk managers at Sony and presented this to them. And I am a member of what's called TIRF, Technology Industry Risk Forum. And we do not share, or I'm sorry, we do not keep secret those things that are safety related. So we're always, as risk managers, we say that safety is not intellectual property. And so because of that, if we can introduce a system that helps each company be more safe, and a lot of these risks that we're talking about have some aspect of personnel safety embedded within them. You'll find it very easily. And so we collaborate quite often. This is becoming more, again, it's only been out for about 3 years is when Micron really initiated it. So it's starting to get momentum. Our insurers like it. Companies, again, like Chubb, Allianz, AXA XL, HDI, Factory Mutual, they're all on board with it. And now whenever they see an RPN number, they know how to evaluate what that really means. So it's not proprietary yet. I don't know, might be. And yes, I do share it with others because it's, I'm a competitive person, but I want to beat you in your best. So how do I get you at your best before I can beat you? Okay, anybody else? Got a couple more in the middle here?
Have you feed the method to ChatGPT and ask for its opinion or maybe recommendations, improvement, or any?
That's a great question. Not yet. That will be happening soon, but not yet. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I fully agree with you. It needs to go through something like that. See if we can make some refinements. Absolutely. Another.
With the example, you told us how to measure risk, but how to measure if it is best for you to do the modification on your plant with adding electronical component, or just go to your favorite insurance company and tell, guys, I have this problem. Could you give me a quote about how much it's going to cost me? Because if you decided to yourself modify your plant, as it is high-tech, really sensitive, the fact that you will modify the plant itself is a risk that you add on your company.
Yeah, that's a great observation, and you're exactly right. So depending upon which country you're in, there are some Asian countries where we have insurance policies. There is, there's a technical fund that the insurers actually set aside a certain percentage of the premium that is supposed to be specifically dedicated towards risk mitigation efforts. So this is a partnership, and this is one of the things that you develop with an insurance company, and they say, okay, you're going to take 2% or 3% of your premium, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's more than zero. And they say, okay, we're going to give you this money back, but you have to spend it on risk mitigation efforts. And then, we We'd like to see what you're doing before you spend that money. So that's a great example of what we might end up doing. We could go to the insurance company and say, we got a $1.5 million exposure. It's going to be $260,000. Can we split the bill? Absolutely. In insurance, almost everything's negotiable. Almost everything's negotiable. That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Well, I think we should give our speaker another round of applause. And before we go tonight, we do have a couple of gifts to give to our speaker. This is Kyle Ricks. Kyle's the president of the Risk Management and Insurance Advisory Board, and he will be our MC tomorrow night at the program that I discussed at the beginning. So, Kyle, please.
Yeah. Well, hey, I don't need a microphone. I'm pretty loud. But first, we want to thank you so much for coming out. Collin's a busy man, so coming all the way to Pullman, spending a couple days with us, and doing this presentation was great, and so we appreciate that.
Thank you, Kyle.
Now, as a token of our appreciation, we're presenting you with a
Oh, wow.
Walton Lecture plaque,
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
and then a couple other items.
You even got my name spelled right and everything. That's
Collin's
fantastic.
a Boise State grad too, so we figured we'd give him a Wazoo polo.
Which is awesome. I love it.
Especially
I
being
love
part
it.
of the Pac-12
No,
now.
yeah.
And then last but not least, of course, Cougar Gold.
Oh,
We
love
appreciate
it. That's
Yeah, we appreciate
fantastic.
it.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kyle. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.